So I've decided to make a video documenting my first ever game jam. I've decided to go with my first game jam through July 27th through August 10th. I almost said October. Off to a great start. It starts in 5 hours or 6 hours from now. So I figured I would just take this time to go over all the rules and everything. Who can join? Anyone. I'm an anyone. You can work alone or in teams. Good. Gonna be working alone for this. No limit to team size. When is the jam? We know that. What can I make? Make a game or functional interactive work in 2 weeks. I think I can pull that off. 2 weeks is more time than 48 hours. That's for sure. All right. So everything seems in order. I guess we just join the jam and wait until the theme is announced, and then we can get started. Join jam. I've officially joined this jam. Come to this page after the jam starts to submit your project. Perfect. I guess we just wait now. All right, I'm here. It's 2 in the morning. The uh what's it called? Oh man. I practiced this in my head before. The theme is set to be announced in 30 seconds. And I've decided I'm gonna do the theme even though it's optional because it would just kind of feel cheap not to, unless it's something like crazy. But that's part of the fun. So I'm resigning myself to follow the theme right now. It's on a recording, so I can't back out of it. Starts in -2 seconds. All right. Did it get announced? Here it is. Uh, Theme announcement. Our theme, entirely optional for this jam, is light. You may use the theme in your game, but you don't have to. While the focus of our jam is learning, we provide theme for jammers who are interested. So light. So now I have 2 weeks to make a game on the theme light. Interesting. So I've come to the most peaceful of places I could think of, which is hell, evidently. No, it's Gary's Mod Surf server. I like to uh, I like to come here to think, turn my brain off and just surf some sick ramps. Light. Okay, well, right off the bat, there's multiple meanings for the word light. There's light as in the opposite of dark. There is light as in not heavy. There is light the verb, like lighting something on fire or lighting, film lighting. None of this really gets me anywhere though. It'll come to me. I got 2 weeks. I'm like stressed. Like imagine how much I'd be freaking out uh, if this was one of the 48-hour ones. I'd be losing it right now. Light the way. Light versus dark. Light prevails. I'm just kind of thinking of cliches that I've heard. Light on cargo? Maybe some like spaceship trading game, but that's stretching it. Unless we tie it into stars somehow, like maybe you go from star system to star system, like star to star, maybe. So I've got a game where you light trees on fire to stop them from growing. Space game where you go from star to star trading stuff? Question mark. Game where you have to go around and light the lamps in a dungeon or in a town or something to keep monsters away. Game where you control an orbital defense grid defending a planet and have to light up the enemy ships attacking the planet. Now that one actually has like gameplay and like a loop to it. You know what I mean? Like, because you can blow them up and then maybe like scavenge stuff and upgrade your defense grid, stuff like that. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a game where you defend a planet. So this is the planet, and you build like orbiting defensive weapons that will shoot down. Over here will be all the buttons. So it'll be a square on the right of the planet, and you can scroll in and out and stuff probably. And you build these defensive orbital cannons, and these orbital cannons will charge from the sunlight, right? They'll have like solar panels on them or something. And when they're in the shadow of the planet, so that's the shadow, they won't charge anymore. So you kind of gotta like spread them out and like adjust your plans based on the shadow. And the shadow will obviously move around the planet. And then it'll be like wave based enemies that come in from out here and try to attack it. Um, and yeah, and over here will be like the buttons on like what you can build and stuff. So there'll be some UI that I'll figure out, but that's not for now. This is just a concept drawing. And yeah, so that's the first stage. I want to get that much done, and then I think if I have more time, I'll want to make it so you could like so it's the economy for like building these uh, weapons. Like you can build like factories on the planet. You know what I mean? And like the more of these you have, the more money you'll make or more resources you'll make. Maybe do some sort of resource system. So you have to strategically plan your build order and stuff. All right, so I put together a quick game design document. It's really simple. Um, we can skip the stuff at the top that's not important, but we have our main mechanics that we want the game to have, and then at the bottom is the most important part. It's our to-do list. So it's just a collection of a few like things we got to get done that are we can get done like in the near future, and we'll add things as they come up, but these are the first few tasks that we need to get done before anything else. So let's go ahead and get started. Day one started the development process in earnest. I set up my project and decided I would get to work on placeholder graphics. So I made this panel. This will host all of the UI elements like buttons and game information and stuff. Still haven't worked out quite how that's going to be designed yet, but that's a later problem. After that, I moved on to the placeholder graphics for the planet. A blue circle will work for now. Got to center it, so noticed it was too big, so I decided to make it smaller. Sorry, I'm recording this after the fact, so it's going by at the speed you're seeing it. So it's a little tricky remembering what I all did. Oh, and then I made this black bar for the shadow of the planet. Now, if you'll remember, the cannons won't charge when they're in this shadow, and all I did is make a black rectangle and make sure that it rotates around a point that is in the center of the circle, if that makes sense. So it's just a black rectangle that turns around this blue circle, and it's actually a really convincing effect for how simple it is. And after that, I decided I would finish up by creating a year timer at the top. So every time this black shadow goes around the planet, that represents like it going around the sun one time. So it will tick up the year by one every time the shadow's in the same place. I'm pretty sure that makes sense. I'm not a cosmologist, so if I got that wrong, forgive me. It is just a simple browser game after all. On day two, the first thing I decided to tackle was the orbital weapon systems, the orbital lasers. So I made a triangle. That way I could kind of tell which way it was pointing, because eventually it'll have to point at enemies and then shoot them. And I used this make objects orbit around other objects extension. I even looked at the example project here just to get some idea of how to use it. I was pretty confused about it for a little bit, but it's actually really simple. I was just kind of thrown off by how big the event is and how many different settings it has. But once you figure out what it's asking you, it's actually pretty straightforward. It just basically what it does is it selects one object and you tell it what quantity of those objects you want to circle another object, and it will evenly space them in a ring around the first object, in this case our planet, and then it just has it rotate around. You can also have them spin, but I end up doing that later a different way because I didn't want them to just keep spinning around continuously. I want them to actually aim at something when it gets too close. So here's the video that finally explained it to me in a way that made sense, and I actually got stuff to start orbiting the planet, which is good. Unfortunately, the Z layering was broken a bit, so they would get stuck behind the shadow sometimes. So I had to figure that out and fix it. So I forget what. Oh, right here I was just making them point at the mouse to test the rotation to make sure you could actually rotate them using this orbiting extension. Turns out you can, which is good because if you couldn't, I would have to do the orbiting system manually, and that would take a lot longer than just using this off-the-shelf extension that already exists. I'm a big proponent of not reinventing the wheel, so especially under a time hack of 2 weeks. I will take any shortcut I can. And then here I decided to start working on the enemies. So they're very simple, at least for now. All they do is move towards the planet at a constant speed. And then they like rotate in the direction they're moving, or rotate toward the planet. I think is how I did it. I should make them go in the direction they're moving because that'll give me more flexibility later. But this works for now. And then once I had them done, I decided to start working on checking whether or not the laser was in the shade or not, and then I wanted to color code them so you could tell. And this gave me a lot of trouble for a little while. I kept switching back and forth between the repeat for each instance event and or however it's event, and it was really confusing. This is one of the biggest problems I have with GDevelop is its instance picking is a little bit weird when like if you have more than one instance of an object and you want to apply different rules to different things and stuff, it can be a little tricky getting the engine to work exactly as you would expect it to. Or it's probably just because I'm dumb, so it took me a lot longer than it should have. Eventually, I just ended up deleting the whole thing and redoing it, and then it just worked fine. Like I have no idea what I did differently than the first time. But I made it so they turn yellow when they're in the shade to represent that they're not getting sun, and that they would turn green when they were in the sun to indicate that they will be charging. Um, and then finally, I made it so instead of having them rotate towards the mouse, they pick the closest enemy to them, and then when they're in range of the gun, they rotate toward that nearest enemy. And that's what I left off with for day 2. On day 3, I wanted to get the lasers firing. So the first step to doing that was setting up a raycast that will return a true value if the raycast intersects any of the enemies. Currently, I have it set up just to check for the one enemy I have. Hopefully, we'll be adding more than one enemy, and I'll have to change this later to check if it is in contact with any of the enemies in the enemies group. But that's neither here nor there. So once I had the raycast set up, I needed to make it so that when you hit space, it fires the laser object. And then it deletes itself after 0.3 seconds so that it doesn't just stay around. So once I got all that working, what did I do next? So I got that working, but it's firing from any laser that has a shot. And I want it to only shoot when an individual laser is selected. So I had to give the laser object an isSelected variable, a boolean, and I wanted to make it so that when you click on the laser, it selects it. So if the isSelected is false, set it to true. If it's true, set it to false. I think that's how I ended up doing that. I might have changed that later, actually. We'll see in a couple seconds here. Yeah, this took me longer than it should have. It should have been really straightforward, but like I've said before, I'm kind of dumb, so it took me a couple tries to get this actually functioning the way I wanted it to. You could see there it was spawning multiple boxes on every laser, which is not what I wanted. I just wanted one to be selected at any given time. Still haven't figured it out. Come on, this should be easy. You're embarrassing yourself. There we go. Now I finally got it working. And then just to double check that it was the only one that it had the is selected to true, I made it temporarily turn it purple. That way I could see which ones were set to true and which ones were set to false. And then finally, I wanted to make it so that the laser was only as long as it needs to be, if that makes sense. So it looks like it's making contact with the ship and stopping. Um, and so to do that, I just got the range from the laser to the enemy ship. And then, yeah, I had to make it minus 10 shorter. It looked like it was going through it a bit. But I finally got it working how I wanted to. And yeah, that's day 3. So, on day 4, I started by squashing a bug where the lasers wouldn't rotate to the closer enemy if they had previously targeted a different enemy. It was an easy fix. I just had to add one more check in the code, and there we go. Now you see it switches targets to a different enemy if that enemy is closer than the other one. That's how I wanted it to work originally, but I'm bad at this, so it didn't quite function right at first. That happens all the time, though. What did I do after that? I think I worked on. Oh yeah, okay. I did some GUI work. So I wanted to get displays for the 2 resources in the game, the resources and research counters. This will just let you know how much of each resource you have. Pretty simple. And this is all in development right now, so I'm going to go back and change the fonts and make it pretty it up a little bit later on. But I want to get something functioning before I get something looking nice, if that makes sense. Then I added these sort of background elements for the GUI that buttons and things will rest on in the future. I even add to the buttons after this, but just 2 gray boxes. I ended up changing the color of that other gray box to match this one too. Just 2 gray boxes that information and buttons and stuff will rest on. It makes it seem like a I don't know. It just looks nicer. I'm not very good with GUI. I'm still learning that. So I don't really know how to explain my thought process with that. But these are the buttons I made. These will rest in the top bar that I had just made. There will be one button for research and one for infrastructure. Infrastructure will just be everything you can build, whether it be the lasers or the factories, or I think I even want to make it so you can build your own ships so that you can go out and like intercept the ships before they get within your range and stuff like that, and to cover gaps in your laser defense. So you can choose between if you want ships or if you want defensive lasers or if you want to build more factories, and it's all just going to be a balancing game of your resources. And then at the very end of the 100 years, a massive final wave will attack, and that'll be like the real like invasion wave of the aliens. And if you did well enough and you set your defenses up well enough, you should be able to defend your planet without everybody getting killed. That's the idea for the game, anyway. Well, it's all subject to change. I've tweaked things here and there while I've been developing it, but the core idea has more or less stayed the same. It's interesting how stuff changes on you as time moves on. I was having some trouble getting these because the text for these resources will change depending on like if you have 500 or 1,000, like it'll be different widths. I gotta figure out how to set it up so that it stays visible and it doesn't like cut off the screen, if that makes sense. I think I'm just gonna end up moving all the resources over to that left panel in some way instead of having it over the game area on the right, because it's also kind of distracting and it can interfere with seeing the ships coming and stuff like that. So I think I'm going to move those to the left panel. What did I do next? Oh yeah, I ran into a bug where if you clicked not on a laser, the box would stop like sitting on the lasers, if that makes sense. It would stop tracking it. So I just had to change 1 or 2 things and got that fixed. A lot of bug squashing in this one, but you know that stuff's important. It adds up. There might even come a day where I just do nothing but bug crushing. But if we do our job right now, that won't be necessary later. On day 5, the first thing I decided to do was add the indicator that shows you how charged the weapons are. At first, I wanted to make it a bar that would gradually grow and show you the percentage of charge it's at. And to do that, I was going to set the bar. I gave the laser object a variable charge that starts at 0, and when it's in the sun, it increments by 1, right? And I wanted to set the bar's width to be the current charge divided by the maximum charge and then multiplied by the width of the bar. And I had done this before, and for some reason the engine wasn't letting me select the variable I needed. So I even looked, you can see me looking through tutorials. I was looking for, I know I had done this in the past, it was driving me crazy. But I guess in an update, they uh, removed the ability for you to select object variables from the expression builder. You have to type them in manually, which is not very user friendly and kind of weird for them to remove something from the engine that was already there and worked perfectly fine and change it. But whatever, I eventually figured out how to do that, and then I decided to switch it over to a number because this way it makes it more obvious. I just kind of think it worked better with a number, and I think it makes it more obvious what kind of damage you're doing to the opponents, and it gives more information to the player regarding upgrades and like with the research points you'll be able to like increase the maximum charge or like increase the rate at which it charges, and numbers make a lot more sense there. And then I wanted to find out how to round the number to a certain number of decimal places. But I actually ended up doing that off camera because I forgot to record. So I did figure out how to do that. You just got to use the toString and then trunc functions in conjunction, and then it works fine. I think that's coming up here where yeah, you see now it's rounded. Or think I don't know. I recorded this in the morning, and I'm recording this audio at night, so I can't remember quite exactly what I did. But somewhere along the line, I figured out how to truncate the value to a certain number of decimal points. Um, yeah, so you can see me doing some bug testing, making sure everything works. The number goes to 0 when it fires, and then starts recharging again. Works perfectly. And then I came back later in the day to work on the GUI some more. So in the infrastructure tab, these are the things you're going to be able to purchase with resources or money. I still haven't decided if I'm going to keep it money or resources. So currently there's factory, missile silos, spaceport, and I think laboratory. And these are some of the structures that you will build that will gain you certain resources. Um, and yeah, after that, started working on making it so that when you click on the top buttons for research or infrastructure, it hides and shows the correct buttons in that panel, if that makes sense. So you'll see in a second here, when I test this, when you click on those buttons, it shows and hides what buttons are visible. And then there's just me testing everything on the right a bit more, and yeah, that ends day 5. On day 6, I got to work a bit later than usual, and I was pretty tired, so I didn't end up getting a lot done, especially not a lot technical done. Most of what I ended up doing was just messing around with the buttons and the GUI. So the first thing I added was the buttons for all of the upgrades, or at least all the upgrades that I have thought of so far. If we have time at the end, I'll maybe add more, but this is just the bare minimum to get a decent amount of choice into the game. So it's what I'm starting with. As well as setting up another rule in the GUI behavior that if you click on one of the lasers, it hides the buttons there. I might change that later, but it felt like something, I don't know, it just felt more complete to do that. And then maybe I can even turn that panel into an information panel or something like that. I don't know, still haven't decided. Um Yeah, and then when I was done with that, I decided I needed more space on the side to put the prices of things, and like it'll say like the how much the upgrade costs in research points and like what the current value is now and what it'll go to. I think so it'll be like increase range from 100 to 120, cost 100 research points. And I figured it would just look better if all that was on the right there. So I left aligned everything. It was a bit of a manual process. I kind of wish I just did that from the beginning, but I wasn't thinking ahead and it cost me some time later on. But it was a nice, easy thing to do while I didn't have the patience for it. And then I just changed some hard coded values to a variable. Okay, so because we're about halfway through the jam, I decided I wanted to just take a little time to take a look at our to-do list and see what we have left to do and what has been completed. So we've made a planet with a shadow being cast that rotates around it. We've made defense guns that orbit the planet. We made the guns charge in the sun but not in the shade, so we can go ahead and cross that off as well. Make an enemy spawn wave system. That's probably going to be the last thing we do. We'll see, or one of the last things we do, but we're approaching it. Make it so the guns shoot the enemies. That is completed. Make the gun's target changeable between closest capital ships and missiles. We'll see if we get to that once we make multiple enemies and stuff. Add a system for buying guns with resources. We still haven't added the resource checks, but that's really simple. Add a system that generates resources from factories, also really simple. Add a system that generates research from labs. That's the same thing here, but just a different variable. So we'll knock all three of those out basically all at once. So that'll probably be what we end up doing next, actually. Add shipyard to build your own ships. Yep, that's something we'll have to do next as well. Make ships controllable and movable. We'll see if we get around to that. That we might take off of here, but I think we should be able to do that. That should be pretty simple, actually. We'll see. Create a system for building and placing different buildings. That is also one of the next things we have to do. So that does explain why they're on our to-do list because we have to do them. So we're not out of the woods yet. We're about halfway through the jam, and we have a decent number of systems to still make. But we have around, I think, 7 days left. I think so. I zero indexed these days, so it can be a little confusing. What is half of 14? Um, but yeah, so 7 more days left. These are the things we got to get done. I'm feeling pretty good about this. We probably won't have time to polish it or increase the art too much. So it'll be a very programmer art dev looking game. But I would rather have the complexity of the systems down than it looking nicer. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe next time I do this, I should work with an artist. That way I only have to focus on implementing all the gameplay systems, but I'm feeling good about this. I'm liking the direction the game's going, and I can't wait to see how it is when it's finished. So on day 7, the first thing I got to doing was changing the laser fire action over to a clickable button in the GUI instead of just hitting spacebar. Spacebar worked for testing, but now that we're getting towards the end here, I kind of want to get all of the systems in as fast as possible. So, oh man, and then I ran into a bunch of bugs. So the first bug I ran into was if you had clicked on a laser and it was already selected, it would toggle the is selected variable back to off, and then the little selection box would fall off of the laser and just stay in place. That was a pretty easy fix. Just had to make it so when you click on the laser, it always sets its is selected to true instead of toggling the is selected variable. And that solved it nice and easy. Then I ran into a bug that took a little bit longer to fix. For some reason, and I can't even remember what the reason was. I feel like my brain just blocked this bug out, but I did eventually fix it. But it was every time I would click on a button, it shouldn't have changed its GUI state. It should have registered that it was on a button in that the mouse was on a button in the buttons object group, and not change anything with the GUI because I don't want it to change away from what you just clicked on. is it just feels bad, and then you have to keep reselecting stuff. Took forever to figure out how to get this fixed, and I didn't actually fix the bug. It might even be a bug with the engine itself. For some reason, I put all the buttons into an object group, and was checking against any object in that group to make sure like the cursor is not on any object in the buttons group, and it just wasn't working. So I eventually had to just go back and add all of the buttons in manually, like individually to the event. But that, a bit of a workaround and a bit annoying, wasted a little bit of time, but we eventually got to the desirable result that we wanted. So, um, yeah, I'm still just messing around with debugging. I'm checking online for anyone else having problems with the object groups, but everyone it seems to work for other than me. So I eventually just, I think any second now, eventually I just resorted to adding all the buttons manually. And I think I was also squashing a couple bugs at that time to do with the GUI, so that's why this is taking a bit longer. I was bouncing back and forth between a couple different bugs. Eventually narrowed it down and got came up with the idea to just add all the buttons manually in here. So now it individually checks against each button in that panel, and that actually worked. So I moved on to the. Oh, first I wanted to make it so that when the enemies were hit with a laser, it actually destroys the enemies. In the future, this will just it'll take the amount of charge that the laser has and subtract that from the enemy HP, and then when the enemy HP is 0, then it'll be destroyed. But for now, it just deletes it right away. I don't know why I changed that over. I guess it just felt right to do at the time, but we still have to come back to that later and come up with a whole enemy HP system and stuff. But that's stuff I've done in the past, so it should be fine. Next, I came up with the building system. So I wanted to make a building indicator that follows your mouse when you're in the build mode. And I wanted that to change and I wanted it to follow the cursor and change how it looks depending on which building you have selected. So you can see it follows the mouse. This is just me adding a temp variable that allows me to toggle between the build state variable when I hit space. And then I made sprites for the laboratory and sprites for the missile silo. I think I'll just stick with these for the rest of the project because we're running out of time. So unfortunately the art won't be the best in the world, but I'd rather have a functional game over better art, at least for a game jam. And so the next thing I needed to do was make it so that you actually placed a building of the right type when you have that building selected and you are in the build mode. So I just threw together a quick little check here for checking if you're in GUI state 1 and checking if you clicked on what button you clicked on last, whether it be the factory, missile, or laboratory. And then that sets you into the building type of the button you clicked inside the build mode. And then here I was just exporting the art because I needed to then make actual building objects for each thing. So before it was just the selector icon that was letting you know what you were going to be building, and this actually places the specific type of building that you selected. I know that is a very wordy way to say that. I'm really bad at explaining myself on these because I am just trying to keep up with the sped up video. But as you can see, you can now place buildings of different types on the planet, and it won't let you place them in space. And yeah, the game is coming along pretty well, so I can't wait to get back to work on it on day 8. Day 8 kinda sucked. I got to work really late because I had to pick some people up from the airport pretty late during the time I normally would have been doing stuff. So this is technically early in the morning on day 9, but I'm just going to call it day 8 because it works better for the video. Anyway, I decided I was going to implement the system of being able to select the missile silos. So you'll have two weapons. You'll have the missile silo and you'll have the orbital lasers. And I figured it would be nice and easy to do that, knock that out early in the morning, super tired. Because it would be easy. I just got to reuse the code I used for selecting the orbital lasers, right? Wrong. I didn't make it scalable to other. Look, there was probably a better way to do this, and this probably took me longer than it should have. But you got to understand, it was a long day, so you get to watch me just futz around with this one system and trying to implement it. I eventually resorted to making an entirely new selection box just for the factor or just for the missile silos. So the selection system for the orbiting bodies and the missile silos is completely separate from each other because I again didn't do a good job earlier. So this is me making an exact copy of that first box, changing all the stuff over in the code to reference that new box. And I would have thought this would have worked, but I don't know what I was doing. This should have been simple. This should have just been a copy paste job, change a couple things here and there, but it just kept being buggy and giving me problems. Even yeah, this is all I got done today, but uh, it's done now. Hopefully, I won't break it in the future because I would love to not have to deal with selection stuff. Again, this should be really simple. I literally already did it once in this project, so why this took this long, I don't know. I should have just made it from scratch and just gone with like myself in the moment. Trying to refactor this old code to work on new objects probably wasted more time than it saved. But I thought I was being nice and smart and reusing something I'd already done, but joke's on me. But I eventually did get it working. You can see it's starting to shape up the way I want it to, but it's still glitching out a little bit. Again, this is this is all I was able to get done in day 8, but it was like 3 in the morning. You cut me some slack. We'll have to redouble our efforts in the coming days because there's only 5 more days of the jam left. So I'm gonna have to work harder in the coming days and pick up the slack that earlier me left in this project. Yeah. See you on day 9. So day 9, I started pretty early in the morning at 6 a.m. and I decided I would start out by making it so the missile silo actually launches missiles at the enemies. So I made a rocket object and made it so that that rocket object picked the closest enemy and moved toward it at a constant speed. Right now, I'm just hard coding the variables. I'm gonna go back and change that to like a rocket speed variable later. Um, but this works for now. And then I got sidetracked by a bug in the object selection. I don't even remember specifically what the bug was, but something was wrong with it, and it was driving me crazy. So I was looking through the code, moving some stuff around, just seeing if any small fix would fix it. There was me toggling it off to test which part was broken. Then I toggled off the rocket stuff to see if that's what broke it, but nope, it was just broken from the get-go. So just doing some more debugging, trying to narrow down where in the code things are going wrong. Again, I don't even all the days are blending together. I don't quite remember what was wrong, but I eventually ended up just deleting the sections of the code that handle the object selection and just remaking it over again. But yep. So for a second, I went back to the rocket to test it. It's working good. And next, I needed to make it so it would only launch one of the rockets if its countdown timer was set to 0. And got that working. And then what did I do next? Sorry, this is all just blending together. I did so much today, but it's good. I got to hustle towards the end because I was lazy in the beginning. Missile countdown speed. Yep. So that we can change it later so that we can change the rate at which the countdown happens, if that makes sense, with an upgrade. Um, Doing some more stuff with the missile, or what am I doing now? Yeah, still just debugging stuff with the missile. Made a timer object so you can actually see how much time is remaining before you can fire a missile again. That will be replaced with a bar that will fill up uh, as it gets ready to launch again later on. But right now, it'll just be a little text object in that panel there. Counts down to 0, and when it's at 0, you can fire a rocket again. Um, what did I do next? I made it so that when it fires the rocket, it changes its sprite to not have a missile ready at this on the silo, and when it's ready to fire again, it does have a missile. Just a uh, little touch that and so that you can like see at a glance which missiles are ready to fire and which ones aren't. Then I changed it so that when the rocket hits an enemy, it spawns an explosion object and deletes the rocket and the enemy. I don't know if I'll keep it working that way or if I'll just have the rockets do like a lot of damage because later enemies might have more health and it might take 2 rockets or a rocket and a laser combo to take it down. Just doing some more testing, making sure everything is working right, and just testing more with the rockets. And then I was going to make a timer system for the factory and for the laboratory, but I realized I already had a timer system in the form of the shadow going around the planet. So I made it so that every time that shadow touches um, the year counter, the thing that counts down 1 year every time the shadow goes around it. It also, for each instance of the factory and laboratory, adds a certain amount of those resources to your total, if that makes sense. So every year you'll get plus 100 research from the laboratories and plus 100 resources from the factories. And then those are the resources you use to buy more buildings and upgrade your buildings and stuff like that. So we're finally getting into the gameplay portion, if you can call it that. I mean, it's a, idle clicker type game. Well, not really clicker, but I don't even know. I'm tired. This has been a long day. Got a lot done today. Feeling good about it. We're in the home stretch. 5 more days left. All the days are blending together. Oh, and my organization in the project is falling apart. There's a ton of stuff that is in the orbiting objects external event that is just completely unrelated to the orbital objects. Like some of the buildings code is in the orbiting objects code. And this is me just searching up how to make new lines on a text object. So those red numbers in the top left corner there, it's just debug information for the upgrade system that I started working on. So I was making it so that you can actually, when you click on the upgrades, it actually buys the upgrade and applies the upgrade to whichever variable you are upgrading, if that makes sense. So, like your charge rate, if you click on the charge rate button, it subtracts the amount of research points that it costs, and then it changes your charge rate to be faster, for example. And that's what those debug text objects are there for me to just double check that that's actually functioning. Um, Later on, I'll have to add all that information in the form of like a status screen or something. I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet, but right now, for debug purposes, that red text will do just fine. And then I also wanted to make it so that the buildings, when you built them, it costs money. Like it already hit the building stuff is already working. Other than it's checking if you have enough money, and if you have enough money, you can build, and it will subtract the cost of the building, just like the research system, but with money. Like I said before, uh, pretty simple, but it's just takes a long time to do it. And then I added the prices for everything visually so that when I give this to testers, they can give me feedback on what to change to make it more balanced. That's kind of the goal right now. Get something functioning uh, so that I can get it to testers, and then they can help me balance it later. So all these numbers are subject to change and will change for balancing purposes. But right now, I just made it nice and simple. Um, and yeah, then I did some more testing, making sure everything is working right, and then I called it a day for day 9. But we got a lot done today, so feeling good. Um, yeah, see you tomorrow. Day 10, I started work on the enemies. I wanted to make it so that if they're far enough away, they move towards the planet like they currently do. But then I wanted to make it so that when they got close enough to the planet, they switch modes, target the nearest building, and then they start moving towards that. And then when they get close enough to that building, they fire at it and destroy it. You can see again the bane of my existence. I was having some issues with instance picking. For some reason, I just do it. It just isn't meshing with me quite right. The way this engine handles instance and entity picking. I always get confused if I should be using a for each instance or if I just leave it as a default event. So I usually end up having to bounce back and forth between the two or make mixtures of the two until I get the results I wanted. So it took a bit longer than it probably should have, especially since I've done similar stuff like this in the past. But sometimes that's just how it goes. You can see them shaking back and forth rapidly. That's because they kept in there. That obviously wasn't the desired effect, shooting bullets in all these various different directions. So I had a couple bugs to fix, but one by one, I stomped them out and then got closer and closer to the desired behavior. And yeah, enemy AI, it is not my favorite thing to make. Like I was saying before with the instance picking, it's just something about it. Makes it just rattles my brain a bit. Now I had to make it so that I think this is when I did that. I also had to make it. No, wait, that's later. Never mind. Sorry. So yep. Now you can see they're shooting them. It's destroying the buildings, and then they switch to a new target. And then I just decided to start spawning some buildings to test how they worked and to see, yeah, if the missiles still fired on them and everything worked right. So yeah, everything's looking good. Then what did I do next? Oh, and then I got started on a different enemy. So there's going to be at least 2 enemies. I wanted to have at least 2 just for variety's sake. And this enemy will move a little bit faster than the other one. Um, yeah, so I just copied over everything from the behavior of the first enemy, switched out which entity it's referring to from enemy 1 to enemy 2, and just had to change some things to make it work for the new enemy. Made the enemy a bit smaller because I wanted it to be more like a fighter or bomber type aircraft. That explains why it goes a bit faster. Um, and then I had to test whether or not it was working. And again, I forgot to change certain things over to enemy 2, but slowly got it working. Sorry if I'm not explaining things that well. This jam is starting to take its toll on me. All the days are blending together. My code is a mess. It's all just sloppy and put in random spots. All my organization basically broke down. It's uh, it's definitely a game jam, that's for sure. Though I have been loving it. It's been a really nice experience. This is a excellent jam for anyone out there who hasn't done a game jam before. I would highly recommend the My First Game Jam, just because of its lax rule set and the ample amount of time it gives you. I mean, it doesn't feel like it now. I'm rushing to cram functionality in with what 4 or 5 days left to go. But that's the fun of the jam. So now I needed to make it so that the missile launcher and the laser would target the new enemy. So I switched that over, got that working, and then I just did some testing to see if everything was working all right. Um, yeah, the enemies were able to shoot at the buildings too fast. So then finally, I gave each enemy a countdown for whether or not it can fire. That way, they can't just show up and just boom, 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 hit every one of your buildings. That's no fun. I wanted them to wait around for a little bit between each shot, just to make it more fair. And yeah, that closes out day 10. Stay tuned if you're still watching for day 11 when we work on the spawning system. On day 11, I finally got around to doing the enemy spawning system. This enemy spawning system will check what year it is, and if it's a year I want an enemy to spawn, it will pick one of these enemy spawner objects at random, and it will spawn one of the enemies there. It's just the simplest thing I could think of. It uses an excessive amount of events. There's definitely a better way to do this. But this is just the first thing I thought of, and I just went with it. So don't don't do things this way normally. This is highly wasteful and inefficient, but it works and it's simple. And I knew it would work. Most importantly, so it's what we went with. What was I doing here? Oh, I wanted to be able to check the enemy HPs. So I wanted to make an object that follows the mouse and displays the HP of the closest enemy, and then I would hide that object if the mouse is not on an enemy and show that object if the mouse is on an enemy. And for some reason, I couldn't get this to work. I don't know if it's the same problem I was having with object groups before or what, but maybe I was doing something wrong. Like I've said before, I'm dumb. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm really new to this, but I couldn't get it to work with when it was checking against the actual mouse in the events. So I came up with a workaround where I made a object that would always follow the mouse and be invisible. And then I was checking if that object was close to the enemies, then it would show it, and that worked flawlessly. So weird. It's weird that that doesn't work checking against the mouse directly. You have to come up with this little workaround, but hey, it worked, so I'll take it. And yeah, that just lets me see how much HP the enemies have. And I think this is where I discovered that the laser damage wasn't working right. Uh, I don't quite know now that I was able to see the enemy HP. I could see that when you hit it with a laser, it wasn't subtracting the right amount of HP that it should have. And that was revealed just in this playtesting that I think I'm still doing. Yep, just I misremembered when I encountered that bug, so I'll come up against it soon here. But yep, just doing some testing, changing more variables, pasting in more enemy spawns so that the further into the game you get, the more enemies spawn. So the difficulty ramps up a little bit. Um, yep, just doing some more playtesting. Uh, there's a lot of playtesting towards the end of a game jam because I am so paranoid that at the last moment I'll discover a game-breaking bug and I won't have enough time to fix it. So I haven't even recorded all the playtesting. This is just some of it, just because I don't know how much of that needs to be in the video. But it's mostly just this what you're seeing here. I wanted to include some of it so that you kind of understand the process of just playing it, tweaking a thing, checking how that's balanced, see if you went too far, change it back. Um, yeah, I think it's an important part of at least a game jam game, but all games like you got to play test your stuff, and ideally you want to give it to other people because they'll break it in strange and unique ways that you never will. Um, yeah, so that's tomorrow's job. Get a build out to at least one other person to play test and get feedback from. Yep. Oh, and then I changed the enemies to be white instead of red, and then that way I could color code them based on how much HP I assign them when I spawn them in. So there will be green enemies that'll be less HP, red enemies that'll be middle HP, and then purple enemies that'll have the most HP. just a little visual indicator to tell you like what level those enemies are at a glance. On day 12, I started off by replacing that text object that shows you a countdown for how long it'll take for the missile launcher to be ready to fire again. I changed that out for a bar that gets smaller as that timer goes down. I just feel like it looks a bit better than just having a number there. The number was always temporary, it was always planned to be a bar. Yeah, and so to do that, you just take the current countdown number, divide it by the maximum countdown number, multiply that by the width of the bar, and boom, it'll set the width of the bar to be what percentage of the total that it's currently at. Then I made a stars graphics asset for the background just to make it look a little less plain. And then I got to work on the main menu. There's going to be a start button and a how to play button, and then a title graphic above it. Nothing too fancy, just nice and simple. Uh, I always like doing this at the end because it's not critical, but now that we're actually getting to the end here on day 12, it's probably time to set up start menu. And then after I messed around with that for a little bit, I jumped around a lot today. After that, I decided to change the planet from blue to a more sandy looking planet. And I did this because if I had water in places, it wouldn't make sense for you to be able to place the buildings anywhere on the planet. And I could have then outlined the water with an object and said, "Don't let it spawn buildings here." But I think it was just easier to make the whole planet land and call it a day. A bit of a shortcut, but I'll take what I can get at this point. And then I went back to the main menu and I made it so that when you hit the start button, it sets all of the variables in the game to their defaults. That way, if you lose a round and you restart the game, it doesn't save your money and things from the last game, if that makes sense. And this is only necessary because I saved everything into global variables. If I had saved everything into scene variables, I wouldn't have had to do this. But I have a habit of overusing global variables when I should use scene variables, something I got to work on. Then I just did some more testing, making sure I didn't break anything too critical. And then I made it so that when the missile launchers can't fire, it changes the launch graphic to a reloading graphic. That way, you know you can't fire. Yeah, and just did some more testing, making sure everything's working. And I was also testing out the difficulty. I wanted to see how much slack you have between, like, how many mistakes you can make in your build order and still survive the game. I want it to be not like super impossible, especially since I got to remember that I am familiar with the game, so I know the most optimal way to play it. So a brand new player won't have that knowledge, and so the game will be more difficult for them. So it's best to make the game easy for yourself because you don't realize how much you've gotten used to it over all the testing and stuff you make. So just doing more testing, but look, the game's really come along here. It's finally starting to look like a game. It's got gameplay. It's got a loop. It's got a win condition. It's got a lose condition. It's got everything a game needs. I still think I'm gonna be doing testing off camera to balance the spawn waves. Cause oh god, I am so embarrassed by I can't believe I did the spawn system like that within a single event for each spawn enemy spawned. But hey, it was easy. Okay, and why why spit in the face of simplicity? Then I added a graphic that comes up if you win or if you lose, and then it waits a certain amount of time and sends you back to the main menu so that you can start a new game. Um, yeah, and that's all I got done on day 12. Well, it's finally here, day 13, the final day of my first game jam. First thing I decided to do was tackle the music. So I first made just a simple looping ambient type sounding song for the main menu. Just a nice short loop. People won't be spending too much time in the menu anyway. Saved that and then converted it to an OGG. And the program I'm using is called Ultrabox, by the way. It's a web based music creator. It's really simple, but that's all I need. And yeah, and it's free, which is nice. And it being browser based means you can use it on Linux. So it's what I use. I'm no good at making songs. I've only just started learning how to do that specifically for making songs for my games. So they're all really simple. And then after I was done with the main menu music, I got to work on another looping, ambient, kind of droning music that I wanted to sound kind of like depressing and oppressive, because the idea is, you're up against aliens invading. You're the underdog, right? So I wanted it to be kind of oppressive sounding. We'll see if that turns out to be true. I don't know. Like I said, just like in games, I have no idea what I'm doing making music. I just mess around with the stuff until it sounds good to me. I don't I don't know music theory. I don't know anything. You can see me just trying random stuff, seeing how it sounds. But I eventually get it to a place that I'm happy with. Yeah, and then the rest of what I did is I added the how to play section. You'll see me do that after this. But then I cut out hours and hours and hours of play testing and tweaking variables by like the smallest amounts. I'm talking like good 5-6 hours of play testing over and over and over again, and tweaking variables and making the game more balanced. I decided not to include that in the video because it would just be 15 straight minutes of sped up footage of me playing it over and over again. And that doesn't make for a good video. So here's some play testing. You can see I made it so that the missile silo and the orbital laser now take resources and research, which makes sense because you would need educated populations to build those things. So it makes sense for it to cost both, and it made it more balanced towards the later end game. I have beat the game a couple times, so I know it is possible to beat, but it is decently challenging if you don't build the optimal build order, or if your actions per minute are low, because you really gotta, towards the end when there's 6 or 7 ships on screen at a time, you really got to prioritize your targets. And yeah. Oh, and then here's me making the how to play screen. I decided simpler is better. I hate it when you play a game and it just is a wall of text explaining how to play it. So I made this graphic with the building graphics on it and just put in the simplest terms, factory generates resources, laboratory generates research, missile silo, anti-ship weapon. And I didn't put anything about the laser because I feel like when you see orbital laser in the build menu for the first time, you kind of like want to get, it's like a goal to get to. You want to save your resources up and see what this orbital laser is about. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have included that on the graphic, but I decided not to. And then I finally uploaded the game. Again, this is after play testing for about 6 or 7 hours straight. I also gave it to another person, got some feedback from their play tests. Nerfed the missiles a little bit. That's one of the reasons why I made it cost research as well. Yeah, so this is just me uploading to itch.io and then testing it on there, making sure it works. Again, and then taking screenshots for the game page. Yeah, not the prettiest game in the world, but it's functional, it works, and it's been a blast doing this game jam. All right, so the game jam is over. Uh, the game is done and submitted. You can now go and view it along with all the other games other people made. There were like 90 something submissions when I looked. I played a few of them already. It's really cool to see what other people have been up to the past 2 weeks while I've just been, laser focused on this this project. But yeah, speaking of this project, things I would improve about it. I would definitely update these buttons to be more responsive. So like when your mouse hovers over it, maybe make it like uh, get slightly lighter or whatever, and make it when you click it, maybe make a click noise or something. Just get more feedback in the UI because these static buttons are just really basic. They work, and that was kind of my thinking is get everything working. And then I just had one more day left, and instead of spending it polishing the game like I probably should have, I just couldn't be bothered. I was so over this game by day 14. So I just decided to, it's in a functional state. It works. It has all the stuff in it that I wanted to have in it that was feasible to get to within 2 weeks. It isn't super buggy, which is a first for me. I'm sure as I say that, a massive bug is going to happen while I'm recording this, but it feels solid. It doesn't feel like it's falling apart under the seam or like underneath it, which it is, but it doesn't feel like it, so I'll call that a win. Yeah, pretty good experience for my first game jam. I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future, though probably not right away. Give myself a break from timed game dev. When you have a deadline, it's just different. But yeah, thanks for watching the video and sticking with it. I know it was a long video, but I wanted to show my whole process from the very beginning to the very end. I hope it was enjoyable in some way. And yeah, stay tuned for more videos like this one.